regards to the march. We're going to take some questions from the ground, but I know, Minister, you wanted to clarify something quickly.
No, I think one of the matters I wanted to clarify is, indeed, you have soldiers who embarked on that unfortunate march, which ended up with some of them being suspended, okay? And indeed, they continue to earn a salary. But in 2012, we took a decision to bring them back and give them a new lifeline so that they could appear before the military court and explain themselves and then go back to work, okay? But unfortunately, we've had plus minus 600 of those who have not reported to the base as yet. So what that means is that, in fact, whilst you are trying to sort out things such that, right, there can be a closure on this matter.
But the ones who are absent without leave are still getting a salary as well?
Absolutely. And I'm saying that last week when we met with the generals, one of the things we discussed is that particular matter. And the position of the ministry is that, well, if they don't want to report, then they must go.
Minister, if I may interject there, it's wonderful that they've been given a new lease on life and a lifeline, as it were, but their actions amounted to mutiny. It is quite a serious offence for them to still be receiving a salary and for them to be given, a little slap on the hand, I suppose, and be told they can come back to work. This is, I hate to compare us with other countries, but this is mutiny for them to go against the department and be rogue soldiers, if I can say that.
You're correct, it is mutiny in the true sense of the word. However, South Africa has labor laws, and at times, I must be honest, our labor laws make it very difficult for us to take quick corrective measures and punitive measures. And therefore you have to abide by the regulations which we ourselves, policies that we developed in our democracy. I think we probably took democracy too far and actually somehow forgot that there may be moments where we come across these kinds of challenges.
Okay, I think let's leave that subject for now because this is a discussion that's ongoing and it hasn't been resolved as yet and we can spend all morning on this. Let's go to the floor now. I think table 21 is where our first question will be coming from Commander Begim Vovo. Very good morning to you, Commander. If we can keep the question as brief as possible so that as many people can get their questions answered. I'm not quite certain as to where table 21 is, but there he is. Very good morning to you. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Ayanda. I have two questions, but I think the minister is also in a very difficult position, especially on the last question that you were raising. I think it's important that the members that marched to the Union Building in 2009, that they do not get demonized, especially that process is still sub judice. I'm raising that because directly after that march, the ministry established a defense commission which found a lot of problems in the defense force as a result of that. Now the minister speaks of the defense ombud that was established. The defense ombud is as a result of that march. After the defense commission made certain recommendations, the salaries of soldiers were actually made better because of that march, and many other issues that were as a result of that. So I actually think that without saying this side was bad or that side was bad, what we need to actually make sure is that there's a good labor regime that deals with labor issues in the defense force. Otherwise, this thing might happen again. I just wanted to comment on that. The two things I actually wanted to say, Minister, is firstly, let me admit that in 20 years of democracy, there's a good story to tell. And I think in the Defense Force, there's a lot that has happened. And I personally am one of those people that can say in 20 years, when I integrated to the SANDF and the SA Navy in particular in 1994, I only had N1 and I did not have a metric. But through that, I completed my matric. I got my engineering degree, assisted by the South African Navy, and I've enrolled for the MBA, which is also paid for by the Defence Force. And I'm not the only one. There are many, many soldiers, and some that have left the Defence Force who have actually been developed there. So apart from my earlier comment, I actually think that there are many good stories. And it is on those stories that I'm standing up to say, I think we can actually strengthen more, especially around the issue of skills development. I'm standing today wearing a different uniform. The Chief of the Navy asked me, why are you not in uniform? I'm wearing a different uniform because I'm representing the Minister of Higher Education and Training as a member of the board of SASITA, which is a very key seater in the skills development and a key ally to the Defence Force, because the defence is part of our SITA. But there has been quite some challenges where we've sponsored, or the SITA has sponsored courses for youngsters who are in the Defence Force. But it seems that there are some difficulties, because some of those youngsters, whilst they are busy with their training, some doing diplomas, they get recalled by the commanders back to the Defence Force. And what I want to ask the Minister is that there must be a structured regime of skills development so that we can all achieve what the National Development Plan is trying to get through the National Skills Development Strategy and the Human Resource Development Strategy of South Africa. The last one is what you raised, Minister, on the medical issue. 1 meal, 2 meal, and the rest. And I want to ask the Minister to explore the possibility of sending members of the military skills development to Cuba for the training as military doctors. I've been in Cuba last year in October. I've actually seen what their universities can achieve. And I think what the government is doing through the Ministry of Higher Education and Training, and provinces sending youngsters to be trained in Cuba, I think the Defence Force can take advantage of that.
Commander Mvovo, thank you so much for your question. I think, Minister, a two-pronged approach there. The first one, why not use the opportunity to train military doctors in Cuba? The second one, more about skills development and training, if we can get through that as soon as possible and as quickly as possible, please.
Thank you very much, Mvovo. Thank you very much. I agree with everything which you have said, and congratulations to you. You've done very well in the Defence Force. And we've invested a lot on you. I don't know why you are in SASITA now. but I think I need to explain myself. It's not about, I'm not demonizing the people who marched to the Union Building. But the issue for me is, here are people who marched on the Union Building. And you're right, most of the things, the achievements were made as a result of that march. But that should still not justify the fact that there's indiscipline, that there are people who are still not back at work, even though we have given them an opportunity to come back so that they appear before the courts and explain themselves. And I think that's where I have a problem. And I think that for those of you who are out there, who also interact with some of them, I think you should encourage them to come back. Because the issue for me is you can't keep 600 warm bodies on a payroll, but who are not available to do some work. So there must come a time when the system will take the risk and hold the bulls by the horns and perhaps throw them out of the system, because they've been out for a long time. And of course, I must be honest, I'm looking at ways legally of doing it. Because there are those who have reported back to work, but you have this grouping of 600 which believes that they can solve their problems by talking to the media instead of appearing before the courts, explain themselves, and take whatever punitive measures that should be given to them. And I think that's where I have a bit of a problem. And the Defence Service Commission, yes, you're right. We now have a permanent Defence Service Commission, which was recently appointed in October, I think, October. And it has already started doing a lot of work, and I think they already have scanned the environment, and they have a sense of what is happening in the Defence Force, and they know that there are specific tasks that we've assigned to them for immediate intervention. So, yes. And lastly, I think you've read our minds or somebody gave you this information. Yes, we are now preparing to send a group of people to Cuba to go and train as doctors. So out of the group that Minister Mtswaledi gets every year, we are getting a quota for the South African National Defence Force for training of our own doctors. But of course, we want to expand our training. It will go beyond the medical. We're looking at other areas. There's a big, big problem in South Africa. One of the things that we needed to have done from the beginning in 1994 is investment in skills development. We have shortage of critical skills, so we want to train more pilots, we want to train more controllers, we want to train doctors, of course. There are a number of as you know, of areas where there is shortage, literally shortage of personnel for those. So that's why we are targeting tertiary institutions and high schools. We want to target and recruit the bright students, and we send them out to Cuba in big groups, 3-4 years time, 5 years, they come back, and some of them, when they come back, they're highly qualified, and some of them, if they were soldiers, will come in as highly qualified officers of the Defence Force. So that is the program that we are on right now.
Still on that same topic of training doctors and other personnel in Cuba, you did touch on it during your speech, Minister, about the fact that there's mass resignations in military hospitals and that you are looking into that. By when do you think that we'll get answers?
Well, this happened recently. I must say that we're not aware of the extent of the resignations. Yes, there are genuine problems that we needed to attend to with immediate effect, such as issues of overtime and so on. But there's something called, in the Defence Force, what do you call this overtime? Remind me? No, not OST. The what? Something called commuted overtime, which is the strangest phenomenon I've ever heard. Because what that means is that whether you've done some overtime work or not, whether you've worked extra hours or not, you still get overtime money. So it's called commuted overtime. Now, I'm told that some of the doctors who have resigned may be genuinely people who should have received their overtime money. Some of them just feel that the conditions under which they work are not as good. It is for that reason that I decided that we're not going to depend on answers that will be provided to us by the Defence Force, but rather we establish a team of professionals, medical professionals, who will then interact with some of these doctors, but also who will interact with the doctors who are currently in our systems, the entire medical personnel, including visiting the different hospitals, to establish exactly what is the problem, what is the nature of the problem, and what is it that we can do to remedy the situation. And I'm glad that that team is here today, and I'm having a meeting with them after this TNA briefing, because that team has exactly 6 weeks within which to conduct this investigation and provide us with recommendations.
Something else that's quite important is being raised by Lee Mankaka, and I hope I'm not butchering your surname, Lee, like I did the Deputy Ministers a moment or two ago, but you want to raise the issue of rhino poaching. I know the Minister also touched on protecting our environment as some of the key focuses of the troops. Lee, please, will you just explain to us what you want to know from the Minister?
Thanks for that, Ayanda. Minister, your Deputy, thank you for the opportunity. You spoke about holding a bull by the horns, and this goes to horns, if I could put it. In terms of safeguarding our land, when it comes to rhino poaching, it has been charged that a lot of foreign nationals are the ones who actually come in and, are the perpetrators of rhino poaching. Is this not considered a national security threat? And if so, what is the department doing about that? Thank you.
Okay. All right. You're right. It poses a serious threat to the country. It conveys an impression that we are unable to to properly organize ourselves. But as you know, we have 13 companies which are currently deployed along the borders. But not only that, in the last joint commission which we had with Mozambique last year, I think towards the end of the year, October, November, one of the items on the agenda was this particular matter. Because unfortunately, and I'm not saying they are the only ones responsible for this, there are South Africans who are engaged in this kind of criminality. But we also equally have Mozambicans who have been caught, who are responsible for this rhino poaching, obviously colluding with some elements here in South Africa, perhaps even game rangers for that matter. So it's a matter that we believe in the region we cannot deal with it on our own. We've got to work together as a region, as SADC, to deal with this particular matter. And you know that, for instance, in relation to maritime security, there is a strategy for the region. And I believe that even on this matter, this area of rhino poaching and border control, perhaps the region as a region should develop a strategy of how we are going to deal with those matters. But I think we're trying our best. But what is strange, though, is that much as we are trying and in much as we are injecting more personnel and equipment, the numbers keep on rising. So it's a concern which government has, but we're dealing with the matter.
Minister, if we can go to the next question, it's from Jabu Khadebe, table 20. That question I'd like to incorporate with this next one. There's been a lot of lament, the people saying that the incorporation of Umkhonto Sizwe and APLA has been done very disproportionately. Some people from the PAC saying that they feel underrepresented and such. So Jabu's going to touch on another aspect concerning Khoisan and the exclusion thereof of that particular race group in military affairs. So, Jabu, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Perhaps you can elaborate.
Thank you, Ayanda. As you have introduced me, my name is Jabu Khadebe from Khoisan Kingdom and All People's Party. Let me first commend the Minister for the good speech, and indeed commend the SANDF for the good work they have done to protect our democracy and our people in the 20 years. Yes, indeed, they've got a good story to tell. However, I feel that they could have a better story to tell. May I please take the Minister back 20 years ago, during the integration of statutory and non-statutory forces. We all know that there were forces or soldiers, mainly Africans and Khoisan, that were excluded in that process. They were told that they would be considered at a later stage. 20 years later, they are yet to be considered. What is disturbing is that there are numerous attempts to engage with the Defence Force has fallen on deaf ears. However, they remained disciplined and law-abiding citizens of this country. However, their patience is waning thin. And if this continues, I'm afraid that the national security is also under threat. Thank you.
Better you than me, Minister or Deputy. Would you like to address
that? To be honest, I think the Deputy Minister must come in.
Yeah, he's been quiet for quite a while now. Please,
you really have to come in, and I think that you must say something about APLA and MKMVA, because the group that you see here sitting around this table, some of them come from APLA, some of them from MKMVA. DM, I think you should respond to that thing, to that matter of the Khoisan, because your comments, and that comment is not complete. Because actually you should tell the story of what happened 20 years ago. And if we keep on going back to stories of what happened 20 years ago, we're simply embarrassing ourselves. So I think that in raising this particular matter, which is a very sensitive matter, but people must be honest in the way they raise these matters, and must be honest and provide all information as to what was the role of that particular category. Not coincidence, I'm talking about some of the black people who were not integrated into the Defence Force. What were the reasons for that? What role were they playing in the country? That's why I'm saying don't keep on going back to 20 years and 1994, because we're going to embarrass ourselves. We've moved under very difficult conditions, but our amalgamation process is one of the success stories of any country that came from a history of warring parties. And you now talk about the South African National Defence Force that speaks with one voice, where there is no discrimination as to who came from MKMVA, who came from the TBVC state, who came from APLA, who came from the statutory forces of the day. There's no such language in the Defence Force now. So this story of taking us 20 years back all the time, I think we must be very careful. And this thing of this threat to national security, there's no threat to national security. There is absolutely no threat. South Africa gives opportunity to everybody to express themselves. There's freedom of expression in this country. And that freedom of expression will not allow for anyone to pose national security to a threat to national security in the country. Ours is to defend what we have, because people died in this country in order for us to be who we are and to make the kinds of strides and achievements that we have made. So, no threat. So that one, minus from the intervention.
I think you've answered the question, Minister. For time purposes, I'm going to ask us to move on. Table 36, is it Adele Diacher? Adele has a question. Yes, Adele, please can you address the Minister or the Deputy?
Good morning, Minister and Deputy Minister. My question is about the use of military aeroplanes and helicopters by the President and the Deputy President. Can you, for holiday destinations, can you please elaborate on that?
Personal use of military equipment such as the helicopters and planes by the President and Deputy President, I think other cabinet ministers as well. What's the regulation and rules when it comes to that?
I think...
Okay, we seem to be having some audio problems, so while we get that sorted out, we're going to take a quick ad break, but it's on a bit of a cliffhanger because I have a feeling a lot of people want to get the answer to this particular question. So do stay with us. We're going to take just a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get the answer. Stay with us.